everyone. So the recipe that I'm going to be making for you today is one of my favorite Instant Pot recipes. It's fast and easy, great for families, great to freeze for later. So it's an unstuffed pepper soup, and it's exactly like it sounds, deconstructed stuffed pepper in soup form. I'm also going to be making a fresh cauliflower rice to go with it as a base, but you can really use whatever you want, either regular rice, cauliflower rice, fresh or frozen, or you could even go with mashed potatoes, whatever your heart desires. So the first step would be to make sure that you have all your ingredients together and have washed any of your produce, and also make sure that you have the right tools for the recipe. So we're going to start with the peppers first. We're going to be cutting these up into small bite-sized pieces. So you first want to get rid of the top of the pepper as well as the seeds. So I'm cutting down from the bottom to the top. Then you're going to slice these pieces here into smaller slivers. And really you can use any type of pepper that you like. I prefer red and yellow because they're a little bit sweeter than the green ones, but feel free to use any color you wish. Now you're going to want to dice these into smaller pieces and do all 3 peppers and put those in a bowl to the side. Next, we are going to take care of the green onions. So you're going to chop off those little bits at the bottom, and then we're going to cut the bottoms or the whites separate from the tops or the green parts. And so you're going to start with the whites first, chopping these into thin pieces and putting those aside in a bowl. And this is going to be going right into the soup. The green is going to be a garnish for the top, so you can do that separately. Now we're going to start with the Instant Pot. So you're going to hit the saute button, add some olive oil, and then we are going to add our meat. So you can use any meat you want, turkey, ground chicken, beef, lamb, whatever you prefer. You need to add some salt and pepper to that and let that saute up for a bit, and make sure to break the meat up. And once the meat starts browning a little bit, you're going to add some Italian seasoning. I like to use Flavor God seasonings because they're fairly natural. They don't have any additives in them. So do 2 teaspoons of that and continue to break things up. Now you're going to add in all of the peppers as well as the green onion bottoms. Then add in the fire roasted diced tomatoes, as well as the tomato sauce. Then give that a stir, try and mix things up. And then we're also going to add in the garlic as well. I use a lot of garlic in a lot of my recipes, so I invested in this garlic press, but you could mince it as well. Now we're going to place the lid on, make sure that the valve is closed, and we're going to choose pressure cook or manual and change the time up to 10 minutes. Now for the cauliflower rice, you're going to want to remove the stem from the cauliflower and chop the pieces away. And then you're going to chop those pieces into smaller bits. Now use a food processor to chop up the pieces into the actual rice. You're going to heat some oil in a pan on medium to high heat, add in the rice, and cover that and cook for 5 to 10 minutes. Once the Instant Pot beeps, you're going to want to release the pressure. And as soon as all of the pressure is gone, you can open the lid, and here's a little tip. You can actually hook the lid into the arm there so you don't burn yourself. And then I add the mushrooms at the end, because if you add them during, they're going to get all mushy. And then just mix things up again. Now just add in the cauliflower and the mixture from the Instant Pot. And don't forget to garnish it with your green onions. And there you have it.
Hi, and welcome to Cooking with the Cahills. On today's episode, we're going to be making some black bean and poblano flautas with an avocado crema and a homemade pico, and then we're also making a Mexican rice on the side. Now, this is a vegetarian dish. It can be made vegan by getting rid of the cheese and swapping out the sour cream with the crema, but beyond that, it's a dish that we picked up from a mailbox a while back, and we started making it on our own and putting our own spin on it, so I hope you like it.
To make these flautas today, we're going to need some flour tortillas, black beans, poblano peppers, Roma tomatoes, a lime, an avocado, a yellow onion, cilantro, sour cream, a blend of Southwest spices, salt, pepper, and whichever oil you prefer. We are also doing this with a side of Mexican rice today. To get started today, you're going to want a cutting board, a couple small prep bowls, a small strainer for the beans, a masher also for the beans, a knife, some tongs, a frying pan, a small pot, and a medium pot.
So you want to start with the rice because it usually takes the longest, and if it takes you a little bit longer to cook everything else, this can just kind of sit there while you do everything else that you need to do. We're just using package instructions today. I know sometimes we make our own, but we're going to cheat because we wanted to focus on the flautas. We're using Vigo authentic Mexican rice with 2.5 cups of water and some butter. And the package says to boil, bring this to a boil and then let it simmer for 23 minutes.
While your rice is cooking, you can go ahead and prep your produce. You're going to want to dice up your poblano peppers, your tomatoes, slice up about 3/4 of your onion, and then dice the other quarter. Chop up your cilantro and have your lime. Next, we're going to put together the pico. So we're going to take the diced up tomatoes and the diced up onions, and we're going to mix those together. Then we're going to take half of the lime and squeeze the lime. Get out as much juice as you can. A little salt and pepper. And some cilantro. Mix that all together and let it sit. And that's pico. So a really important step is to drain the liquid out of your black beans, but you want to reserve the liquid. So what I'm going to do is take this strainer and put it on a small bowl in the sink and drain the beans over the bowl. And now I have my beans and my bean juice.
Next, you want to heat a drizzle of oil over medium-high heat in your frying pan, and you're going to put in the poblanos and the onions, and you're going to cook them up for a few minutes until they're soft. Now, the poblanos are not spicy, so they're pretty good for anyone, whether you like spice or not. If you did want to kick it up a notch, you can always add a different kind of pepper, maybe a jalapeno or something, but we use poblanos just because it's good for everyone to be able to eat, not too much spice. So you want to cook these up until they're soft, till the onions start to brown a little bit, not too much.
Once these have cooked and softened, you're going to want to add half of your drained beans, along with a tablespoon of your Southwest spices. And you're going to cook this until fragrant, usually about 2 to 3 minutes. Once this is done, you can go ahead and turn off your burner. You're going to transfer this to a bowl to cool, and you're going to rinse your frying pan so that we can fry the flautas. Next, you're going to heat another drizzle of olive oil in a small pot, and you're going to add the remaining beans. You're going to cook them over a medium-high heat until they're slightly softened. It's about 2 to 3 minutes. These are good and soft. So then we're going to take the reserved bean liquid, and we're going to add that. And we're going to cook this until it simmers.
Now, once the beans come to a simmer, you're going to want to lower the heat down to low, and you're going to mix in a tablespoon of butter. Now, you're going to want to mix that up, and once the butter melts, you can turn it off. When you turn it off, you're actually going to mash this until it becomes kind of like a bean paste, until it's nice and smooth, and then you can either season with salt and pepper, or we use adobo, so if you have adobo, you can use that. So once everything is all set there and the butter is all melted, you're just going to mash this up really good and get in there and make sure that you get everything nice and smooth. This can probably take a few seconds. This is actually like the most work out of the whole thing here, so other than that, this is pretty easy. This is what it should look like when it's done, and I know this looks gross, but I promise it is really good. It has some flavor, especially with the adobo in there, and this is really going to be the base of the flauta, so this is important, and it's really good, I do promise, despite the looks there.
Next, you're going to go ahead and assemble your flautas. Put your flour tortillas in the bean paste we just made. And you're going to smear the bean paste on the flauta, or on the tortilla. This recipe makes about 6, sometimes I can get 8, flautas. So once you smear that on, you're going to take your onions and your peppers and your beans from earlier. And put them on.
And then you're going to want to add some of the Mexican cheese. And then once that's on there, comes the fun part where you get to roll it up. Now, flautas are rolled tacos. It's just another name for rolled tacos. Some people call them taquitos. But you roll them, and then you fry them in some oil a little bit. And they're nice and crispy on the outside. Now, we're making these vegetarian. We've also made chicken and beef flautas. You can make them with any protein you like, but these are the vegetarian flautas that we wanted to make here.
In the same pan from earlier, you're going to heat up some oil and take your flautas that you just rolled and cook them for about 2 minutes per side in the oil. After they've cooked for about 2 minutes, take your tongs and flip them. You'll see they're nice and golden brown. Cook for another 2 minutes on that side, and you're all done.
While they're frying up, you can spend this time to make some of the avocado crema. So first you dice up the avocado, throw that in a bowl. Squeeze the other half of lime in there that you had from earlier. And then you want to add some sour cream. Now there's no magic ratio here. It's whatever you like, whatever you think tastes best for you. I'm going to put a few teaspoons in there. Anyway. And then you're going to mix in some cilantro. And a little bit of adobo. And you're just going to kind of mash this up. Now you can taste it when you're done mashing it. If you wanted if you want more sour cream, you can add more sour cream, but you just mash this up. Mash this up until you get the consistency you like, similar to a guacamole of some sort. I know I like it a little bit chunky, so I don't know about you, but if you want to mash it up a little bit more, you can mash it up a little bit more. You cook all the flautas until they're crispy, you put them on a plate, and you're ready to go and ready to serve. So this usually takes about a half hour, 45 minutes total to make, but it's well worth it. It's a very flavorful.
you guys hate baking because your kitchen always ends up in a floury fog? Do you wish you had something more impressive to serve your guests at dessert time than a pre-opened package of stale Oreos? If you answered yes to any of those questions, this recipe is for you. I'm Liz Gordon, and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be making a flourless chocolate, orange, and bourbon cake. If an old-fashioned, pudding, and custard had a baby, this would be it. It's delicious and it's actually really easy to make and has a real wow factor when you serve it at dessert time. So the ingredients for this are really simple. We have chocolate, sugar, eggs, butter, 1 orange, peppercorns, bourbon, and Angostura bitters. This is the only weirdo ingredient, I promise. I didn't know what it was either before this recipe, but it's something you can absolutely get on Amazon. So the very first thing I'm gonna do is whisk my eggs together. I have 6 eggs here, and the reason I'm doing this first is because if I whisk them together now, that will give the eggs some time to release all of those air bubbles that developed as I was mixing it. And we don't want air bubbles in this cake because we want it to be really silky smooth. Okay, so now that I have my eggs fully mixed together, I'm just gonna set those aside for now, and I'm gonna move on to my chocolate. So this is 12 ounces of bittersweet chocolate and 4 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. You can buy them just like this in the grocery store. They come in 4-ounce bars already pre-measured, so you literally just need to pop them out of the packaging and crush them up. I did this in a food processor. Drive over them with your car, hit them with a rolling pin in a bag, whatever works for you. But you want to get them into smaller pieces so that it's going to melt a little bit more easily later on in our recipe. Into that chocolate, we're going to add 1 stick of cut salted butter. So this is 8 ounces. So once I put my butter in the chocolate, I'm just going to gently mix it up so that the pieces of butter are evenly distributed throughout the chocolate pieces. So next what I'm going to do is take my orange and a vegetable peeler and just go lengthwise down the orange and take off the outermost part of the peel. This is the part that has all those tasty essential oils in it that we want to keep for our cake, but we want to avoid getting any of the white stuff underneath because that can be a little bit bitter. Okay, so that's done. Now I'm going to take my orange and cut it in half. And I'm going to juice it into a measuring cup. This will get messy, I promise. All right, once I've juiced my orange, I'm gonna take 3 tablespoons and put it into a medium saucepan. Okay, perfect. And now it's time for the bourbon. I'm gonna put 1/2 cup into my remaining orange juice. There we go. And I'm gonna fill the measuring cup with just enough water to make it equal 1 cup of total liquid. All right, so we only have one more prep step left to do. I'm gonna take a 9-inch springform pan. That means the bottom can pop right out when we're done baking it. I'm gonna butter the whole thing, the sides and the bottom. I then cut a piece of parchment paper to the size of the bottom of the pan, and I'm gonna lay that inside after I butter it. Then I'm gonna put more butter on top of the parchment paper. And then once I'm done with that, I'm just gonna preheat my oven to 275. We're now going to turn the heat up to medium-high on the burner. And we're going to add 3/4 cup of sugar to the 3 tablespoons of orange juice that we put in that medium saucepan earlier. I'm also going to add 3 tablespoons of whole peppercorns and the orange peels that we had from earlier. And I'm not going to stir this. I'm just going to kind of keep swirling it around for a minute or two until the orange juice dissolves into the sugar. So you can see that all the sugar is now moistened by the orange juice. So I'm going to continue to let this cook over medium-high heat for about 4 to 5 minutes until it starts bubbling and caramelizing. All right, so I've been swirling this around on the pan for about 4 to 5 minutes, and you can start to see that around the edges especially, it's really browning and caramelizing nicely. And you're gonna know it's also done because you're gonna start to hear the peppercorns actually pop. All right, so now that this is ready, what I'm gonna do is stand back and pour in my orange juice, bourbon, and water mixture, okay? Going to immediately remove it from the heat. And now it's okay to begin stirring it around a little bit. The orange peels and sugar is going to seize up just a little bit, but it will loosen in a minute or two. Once I've given it a stir, I'm going to put it back on medium heat. And just let that soften up a little bit for a minute. After a minute, I'm also going to put in my bitters. I'm going to give that a little stir. Take it off the heat again. And I'm going to bring that right over to my chocolate and butter mixture. All right, so as soon as I pull that off the heat, I'm going to pour it through a strainer right into my chocolate and butter mixture. Make sure I strain all those peppercorns and orange peels out of this. Shake. I'm gonna set that aside. And what I'm gonna do now is just swirl around the sugar syrup into the chocolate and the butter just to coat it. Once everything's sort of coated, we're just going to let it sit there and melt gently with the heat for a couple more minutes. All right, so while the chocolate mixture is sitting and warming for a couple of minutes, I'm going to take the orange peels that I just strained out of the sugar syrup, and I'm just going to pick any peppercorns off, and I'm going to put them into a bowl with 1/3 cup of sugar. So once you have all your orange peels coated in sugar, you're just going to set those aside, and these are going to become a garnish for the cake once we're done with it. Now that our chocolate mixture has been sitting for a few minutes in that hot syrup, I'm going to begin to start gently stirring it. And the reason I'm going to gently stir it instead of whisking it is, again, similar to the eggs, I don't want any air bubbles going into this chocolate mixture. All right, so you can see how smooth this chocolate and butter mixture now is with everything melted and combined together. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna take the eggs that we had beaten at the very beginning of the recipe, and we're gonna combine that with the chocolate. Just as before, we're not gonna whisk it, we're just gonna stir it in gently because we don't wanna add any more air bubbles to this mixture. All right, so you can see that the batter has really become a smooth, silky consistency again. So at this point, we're ready to put it in the pan and bake it. And I have the pan that I buttered a little bit earlier. And I'm actually going to put it in the oven inside of a baking sheet that has a wire rack placed on the bottom. And this is just to really help increase airflow underneath the pan and prevent any burning as we're baking our cake. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that batter in. All right, then I'm gonna take my spoon and I'm gonna pop any bubbles I see that came to the surface of the cake, because we want this to be really, really smooth when it's done. All right, and now we're just gonna put our cake in the oven for 45 minutes on the middle rack, and we will be done. All right, our cake is done. It's been 45 minutes, and as you can see, when I wiggle it, it's still pretty jiggly in the middle. That's exactly what we want. What I'm gonna do while it's still hot is just take a sharp knife, and I'm gonna carefully go around the edge of the cake. And I'm gonna do this so that as the cake cools, the top doesn't develop cracks and split apart. All right, so we've let our cake sit in the fridge overnight just to set, and I've taken it out and popped it out of the pan, put it on our little serving tray here, and I wanna let it warm up for at least an hour or two before I serve it, because when it first comes out of the fridge, it's still pretty fudgy, and we want it to be nice and custardy and silky smooth. So I'm gonna set this aside for a second and go back to the candied orange peels that we had prepared yesterday. So I'm going to take those, which we had just rolled in some sugar after they came out of the hot sugar syrup, and I'm gonna flatten a couple out at a time, and I'm just gonna kind of cut them on the bias, so diagonally, and make very thin little strips of candied orange. And we're gonna put this on the top of our cake as a really nice decoration. All right, so once we have all of our orange peels cut into thin strips, I'm just gonna take these and gently place them all around the outside of the cake, just like this. Tell me that isn't beautiful. All right, and now we finally get to try this thing. So I have a sharp knife here, and I'm going to dip it in hot water and just let it sit for a second to warm up the knife blade, and that's gonna help us get really smooth cuts into this cake. Swipe that off. All right, here we go. All right, this looks so good, and I'm about to try it. I put a little dollop of plain Greek yogurt on the side just because the cake is so rich that can balance it out a little bit, but you can serve it plain if you prefer that as well. Oh my God, that's good. It's like a really, really thick pudding. You have the rich chocolate, you can taste the orange, the bourbon's coming through, and a little bit of spice from the peppercorns that we boiled in the sugar syrup yesterday. It's honestly a super easy cake to make. There's not a lot of ingredients, and it's literally something that you're supposed to put in the fridge for a while or even overnight uncovered. So it's pretty low maintenance to make, but really impressive to serve to your guests. So I hope you enjoyed making this cake with me. Cheers.